Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So we want to bring you something hopeful and helpful for your everyday life, whether you've been following Jesus for a while or you're still trying to figure out exactly what you do believe about God. Now, you'll find on this podcast things that'll help with conversations about marriage and parenting and mental health and work, practical things to help you in your faith journey, and a lot more. So whether you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app or you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Ridge Podcast. Today I get to share a conversation that I had with Brodie Swanson. Brodie serves as a pastor on staff at the Ridge, and we had a conversation about how do you help people become curious about Easter. Part of that is yourself being curious about Easter, but also how do you help somebody that you're investing in, the person that we call year one, become curious about Easter and then invite them to come join you for an Easter service. It's a great conversation. I think you'll really enjoy it. This is my conversation with Brodie. Hey, Brodie, thanks for coming on to the Ridge Podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks, John, for having me. Always love being on the podcast.
Yeah. So I have to ask. I know you're a sports guy. Do you? I know you probably made a bracket. How did it do?
Not so great. Not so great.
Yeah.
We have 6 people in my family that do a bracket competition, and I finished in 5th place, and the championship is tonight. And so that means I don't have any teams left. And yeah.
Hey, not last is a fine goal, I think.
Yeah. I mean, at my age, I'll take anything but not last. That's fine.
And really, I know you're an avid golfer, and so you were probably just stuck in that lowest score mentality, right?
There you go. Thank you for bailing me out. I'll go with that one.
Hey man, so we're getting really close to Easter here, just a couple weeks away, and Easter really is a great time to bring somebody to come join you for service or really start having some conversations, even just about Easter itself. Because even the kind of the mindset of what Easter is probably shifted over the last several years about even maybe knowledge of it. There's a lot of people that have certain associations with it. Maybe it's from their faith background. But as we've seen a rise of a lot of people with no faith background, that might not be the case as much as it was before. And so within that vein, we're talking about year one. Maybe. And so for somebody right now, maybe it's like year one. What in the world is that? Maybe you could give us just a quick refresher on year one.
I get a shot clock on this one. So
yes, exactly. You got 60 seconds. Your time starts now.
Now. All right. Well, year one is when we look at Luke chapter 15, there's a couple of parables, stories that Jesus tells. And one of them is about the parable of the lost sheep. And he says, hey, this shepherd has 100 sheep. 99 of them come home at night. There's one out there. And he puts the 99 safely in their pen so they're cared for, and then goes out and pursues the one. And really what that story is Jesus saying, hey, my goal, my desire is that those who are far from me would actually be close to me. And I'm going to pursue that with everything in me. And so when we talk about year one, we're talking about that one sheep or that one person that might be near to us but far from God. And how can we invest in their life? Not in a way that makes them a project, but in a way that just says, hey, you matter to God, you matter to me, and I'd love for you to know him.
Boom. Wow.
There it is.
I love that. That was great. And so we have, and maybe this is a great opportunity to do this. We have a ton of stuff on year one. So this is a brand new concept to you. And we'd love to have you head over to our website. We'll throw some links in the description. You can learn so much more. We've got so many more resources about how in the world do you do that? How do you invest in someone in a way that you're investing them because you love them and you hope something for them versus you're checking a box, and how to not do it in an awkward or weird way, and so many different elements to that. I don't know, you and your team, Brodie, have spent a ton of time putting those together. And so, any specific, I'm going to put you on the spot, any specific one of those that you'd be like, hey, why don't you start here?
I guess I would tell you 2 things. First, even before you have a one, one of the things we talk about is this acronym called BLESS. And was just talking about this with my middle-aged son, so it does translate to any level. But those first two letters of bless are begin with prayer and listen to them. And I think sometimes when we think of, hey, I'm going to invest in somebody so that they know Jesus, it's more like telling them something instead of just saying, God, would you point me in the right direction and then help me to close my mouth and open up my ears? And I think that's the first thing I would say. And then the second is there's something in those videos that are put together called the relational map. And it's just looking at your life and saying, hey, in the places that I live, work, and play, who do I know that doesn't know Jesus? And if you don't have anybody in those places that you know that doesn't know Jesus, that says something. And the second is if you say, hey, there are people that I know that don't know Jesus, then trying to figure out, how do I pray for them? How do I listen to them? What's that bridge? How does it all begin? That's where I would start. It's not about the end game. It's about how do I take those first little steps to making it something real.
Well, with that in mind, this thing that we're talking about today, it might be a little bit farther along, but it may not be. It may really depend upon what your conversations with your one look like, and that really is Easter. Easter is a great time to invite somebody to come join you for a church service. I know that a lot of times we often don't say, there's a lot of negatives there for you. We usually say, hey, the first step to investing in someone isn't necessarily an invite to come join you for service. It really is caring, like you're talking about, praying and listening. But there are times where it's right to invite somebody to come join you for a service, and Easter's a great time. Why is that? Why is Easter a great time to invite someone?
I think for people in the upper Midwest, which is where we're located, it's culturally acceptable. It's one of those times where people are like, oh, yeah, I go to church. It's kind of like Christmas. It's kind of like Easter, maybe in a couple other little moments, maybe Mother's Day, something like that. But there's these moments where it's like, oh, that's not completely out of the realm of possibility that I would go to church because it's a church thing. But the second thing that I was thinking about as I was preparing for our conversation is it's a perfect time to bring people to church with you. And I say with you because to invite them and then just let them go on their own doesn't build a bridge. It's just like, hey, I checked my box. But it's when we talk about things that are so central to what we believe that they're articulated really clearly every year in those times. And Easter is one of those times. We talk about Jesus. He's the center of what we believe. We talk about his sacrifice for us and his resurrection and the freedom that brings. And so if you wanted somebody to come and understand what it's all about to follow Jesus, it's a great moment because that's what we're talking about. And so I do think that's the thing that's super helpful. It's also nice to be able to kind of package it and say, hey, let's invite, let's go together. And then there's like an understanding, at least in Milwaukee areas, you're going to go eat afterwards, which is always a great place for relationship and conversation to come up. And so it fits pretty well with just how our culture is, but also the central pillars of our faith.
Yeah, you tied a few things in there. You definitely gave a pro tip there where it's promise food,
Promise food, yes.
Yes, yeah. I love the perspective of you're helping, oh, I want them to know more about what I believe. And I want them to have an accurate representation of what it means to follow Jesus. I know that this is going to be a pretty good opportunity to just align different things with that. And so the messaging that they're getting, what probably is going to be talked about within the realm of things, right?
Yeah.
And it's for lack of a better term, it's a safer invite.
I think so.
Content-wise.
You're not going to catch anybody off guard. They're not coming into church going, I wonder what they're going to talk about this week. If they have any history with anything religious, it's a no-brainer. They know that we're gonna get in that section of things. And they're seeing a lot of it on TV and all sorts of different things right now. There's a whole bunch of the specials about Easter and, movies and things like that kind of come on to the television and the movie stuff this time of year. So it's not like it's out of the realm of familiarity.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll hype up our services too. I know that we really go above and beyond to make, we love to make every service great, right? But there is something that like, oh, we put extra effort into a few weekend services every year to just really give it our best. And Easter is one of those. And so you're going to find a great lobby experience, a great kids experience above and beyond the greatness that they usually are. So
I think it's well said.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe that's, and the invite itself may even be step 3 or 4 in our conversation today. Because I think that one of the things that we've chatted about previously that I know you really enjoy is creating a curiosity about God. And even in yourself, with your kids, with people that you have conversations with. And I imagine that one of the big elements to why somebody would accept an invite, besides maybe being polite and being like, well, if I go, I'll get that food, is because they like became curious about Easter. So maybe you could share, hey, how do we do that? How do you help somebody become curious about Easter?
Well, let's start with the one. Okay, because you mentioned a lot of different people groups there, and I think there's a number of people groups that different things bring on different curiosity. So I think I start with my one, and when I get that picture, I picture someone in my neighborhood who is my one, and how would I talk to him that would start to build curiosity? And I think what I'm looking for in those spaces are what I call on-ramps. What are on-ramps into a conversation that he could storytell and avoid spiritual things if he really wanted to, but it's a really easy, low-hanging fruit moment for him to say, hey, yeah, this is what I've experienced. And one of the questions that I usually ask is, hey, what are you doing for Easter? And usually it revolves around some sort of family gathering or some sort of food, because that is what we do. But then I'll usually follow it up with a question and say, what did your family do for Easter when you're growing up? And usually a conversation goes back and forth, and he's a talker, so I usually get pretty good conversations out of him. But then after he's talked about, if he talks about some sort of faith background, I just get curious. Hey, what was that like for you guys? What was that like for you? What did you experience? But if it doesn't include a faith background, then I'll just offer my story a little bit. We were there at the crack of dawn when I was a kid. We had a sunrise service for Easter, and oh man, totally brutal. And then we had another church service right after it. It was crazy, but anyway, it was there all morning, and then we went home and crashed. But to be able then to share a little bit of my experience, so that he hears a spiritual perspective on that, and then to see where it goes. And if it drops dead, then I'm not going to force it. But if it doesn't, then there's usually something where somebody will say, I really have a hard time believing this. And they'll say it out loud. And you're like, totally fair. This is where I go with that. And it just begins a little bit of a back and forth. And I can even offer, hey, this is where my curiosity or doubt goes, because I'm not where you are on this one, but over here, this is kind of what I find it hard to have faith and believe, but I've really worked my way through it. And does it go back and forth that easily all the time? No, but if it's not question based, it feels like an agenda. And so I really dive into that. So that's with my one. You talked about with my kids, and with my kids, what I try to spark curiosity with Easter is to try to enter into the story at certain places. The easy, low-hanging fruit for us as a family is the Last Supper, because every year on Good Friday or a couple days before that, depending on what the schedules look like, we do communion as a family, and we sit down and I go buy a loaf of bread and we use the grape juice or the wine or whatever like that, and we dip, don't sip, and then we sit and we talk about it. And not only what does it mean, how is the bread representative of Jesus's body, and how is the wine or the juice representative of the blood, but we talk about what would it have been like to be a disciple in that room, trying to take it all in. What do you think Jesus was thinking and feeling at that moment? Would you have spent your Last Supper how he spent his Last Supper? And there's a lot of entering into the narrative that then creates curiosity on that kind of stuff.
Could you maybe share, like, how do you prevent that? And I think you touched on it a little bit, but maybe you could do it more explicitly. How do you prevent that from being like a preachy, like, extra lesson from dad? You know what I mean? Like, and to where it truly is like an interactive, like engaging thing, versus like, oh, here's another, 15-minute exposition on something that I've heard about before,
You know me well. I have 15-minute expositions on all sorts of stuff. I wasn't shot
against you. I'm thinking just in general, right? Yeah.
I think so. So here's what I'll tell you is that it always needs to be initiated by me. They don't come asking, hey, can we do communion? And I'm okay with that. But the words that I use to frame that time is we're going to spend a few minutes just remembering and reflecting. And those aren't words that we use all that much in the normal course of life, just as a society nowadays. Reflection, time to reflect is at a minimal. Remembering means that you're looking back instead of looking forward, and everybody's telling you to look forward. And so what we talk about is, what are we remembering here? Okay, and let them talk to me. But then to reflect and say, those questions I told you of, hey, what would it have been like to be in that room? And that's when they get curious about traditions and cultural norms that back then. And, I can add a little bit of color commentary there. But then the other question is, what difference does this make in our life today? Or does it? And once we're done with those questions, unless they are just dialed in and really digging, I pray for us and we go and we're done. And so those are, they know it's coming because we just started doing it and we do it every year. And they don't love that it's coming because I get to choose the time and they don't get to, but once they're there, I think we've built trust that it's not a sermonette, it's an experience. And that's really what I wanted it to be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I think that's, and hopefully creates a pattern and example of something that they can do, going forward too.
Yeah. I would hope so.
How much of the curiosity piece is a product of like keeping yourself curious?
That's a great question. That wasn't on what you sent me. I think that if you are going to be consistently curious, you have to, what's the word I'm going to use? You have to be enamored with things to the point where you just wonder what's next. Because as you dig, you're going to find an answer, but then you're like, well, why is that the way it is? And why is this the way it is? And why did that happen? And what did that mean? You just kind of have to be hungry for it. But it's one of those things like a flywheel, I think, is that if you do it a little bit, you start to get underneath the top layer because the top layer is normally what you know. And so you're not going to get curious. But once you get under that top layer and then you get further down, fascinating stuff comes out. And then stuff that you don't realize that you didn't know. So let me transition to something else that I do to feed my curiosity every year is I go back and I read the story. I read the story. My favorite section of it is John chapter 18 through chapter 21. I just read it. For some reason, when I was a kid and I was in a church and we had to sit in adult church, and so the guy would be rambling on and on like I do now, but he was rambling on and on up on the stage. And I would take my dad's Bible and I would read John chapter 18 and John chapter 19 because it fascinated me. I can't tell you that I even knew then why that was, but just Jesus's last moments, the way he approached crucifixion, the fact that he did it willingly, and then what actually happened. Super shocking in how he did it on purpose because everybody else wants to run away from that kind of stuff, but he ran towards it. And so I read it, and I've read the Gospels, and I'm sure you have too, but then there's another thing. There's a guy, and this is the book. It's called Reliving the Passion by Walter Wangerin. And I was reading it the other day again, and it brought out, he goes, in Mark chapter 14, it's part of the story, it says, and everybody left him and ran away. And a young man followed him with nothing but linen cloth on his body, and they grabbed him, and he left his clothes and ran away naked. And I'm like, okay, that is in the text. And I'm like, I don't remember reading that. Who was that kid? What in the world was he there for? And why did he get mentioned in a gospel? So there's things that, I mean, I don't have the answers for that. I'm kind of looking at that this week, but I'm like, okay, so I haven't seen everything yet. So that means I need to refocus every once in a while and remind myself and reflect on what it says and what it means, and then reflect on, are these things central to who I am, and get curious about me a little bit. And then I think the curiosity, if you can get below that surface level, below what you've always heard or what you've always expected, then I think we're naturally curious beings. It's just we don't take the time to get to the below the surface.
How much of that, like reflection and learning new things, is helpful when you're trying to help other people become curious?
Reflection for them or reflection for me?
Well, I'm thinking about it this way, because I know that when I'm excited about something or I'm learning something new and it's exciting to me, there's always I kind of want to share that, there's this bit about, that my wife and I have with each other is like, I love baseball, and I'll learn, there's so many obscure facts about baseball things, and she'll just get a kick out of how ridiculous some of these stats are, and I'll just share this stat with her, and she thinks it's hilarious. These pitchers have rhyming names, and it's the first time that's happened on this date since this 25 years, and she just thinks it's so ridiculous, but it's kind of fun to share those things when I get excited about them. Is there a piece of that you can kind of translate to maybe we'll stick on Easter right now, but where it's oh, I learned this new thing about Easter. Maybe it's a cultural thing about the Passover meal or something like that, and then that sparks a desire to share more?
It does. I think I think there's a couple of things with that, is that you have to wait for your moment to share Mariners trivia. Because right? Because if you just walk into a room and lead with it, people are like, oh my gosh, what is up with this guy? And I think it's the same in a conversation, but I think when you've been curious and you've learned something new, and over time when you've learned things that other people might not have paid attention to, when you get in a conversation with somebody, what they thought they were always going to hear now takes on a different depth. There's color to it. And I think that's when the timing of saying, hey, I learned that there was a young man that got grabbed and he left his clothes and he ran away naked. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it just sparks that, oh, maybe there's more to this than I thought there was. And I think that's when those little tidbits, some are trivial and some are super important. And yet they all come together to add some color. And hopefully when that happens, I mean, I can't make you be curious about something. All I can do is set the table. And if you choose to eat, then I can keep serving the food. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the reality, is that if I am curious about things and enamored by things and something humors me or catches my attention, then when I set it out on the table, if it's grabbed and it becomes a conversation piece, man, all the better. If not, then you know what? I'm still intrigued by it. And that's a win as well. So. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think one of the big fears that people have with talking about their faith, with sharing, talking to their one, is this fear that if they get asked a question, they won't know the answer to. They won't know enough, right? But it's kind of funny. It's almost a good sign, in a way, right? Because it means they're asking questions. They are curious. It means that you are helping them engage with that aspect of their faith.
Yeah. Well, so okay, we're jumping off now, so you can edit this later if you want to. But I think this is interesting because I think people are scared of people getting curious and I don't have the answer. And so, John, if you asked me a question and I didn't know the answer right away, my answer to your question would probably be to ask you a question. And Jesus did this all the time. He answered questions with questions. So I know it's not illegal because he did it, but
Oh,
I
right,
would
yeah.
say, hey John, where does that question come from? And let you fill that in. Or there's another strategy where whatever you end your question with, if I repeat the last two or three words in a question asking tone, you will almost always fill in the blanks for me. So if you said, I don't want to get in trouble, and I said, get in
In
trouble?
trouble?
Yeah. And all of a sudden you would start to clarify
Yeah.
because that's the way our brains work. And so I think what the beauty of a question that I can't answer, and there's a ton of them, but also the beauty of a question that I could answer this way, but I'm not sure if that's as helpful. I could answer it this way, or I need to tread lightly here or there. When I ask for clarification from you, it helps me know how to answer a question in a way that serves you instead of surprises you. And I think that's super helpful.
Sounds like that might be a useful tactic, even if you've got your encyclopedic Bible knowledge that you're just ready to, spout off, which kind of goes back to our previous conversation about knowing too much stuff. But yeah,
I think it's actually probably the wiser way is to ask for clarification. So because when you ask me a question, I can receive it and go, oh, I know what you're asking, but it might not be what you're asking at all. And so for me to clarify and make sure that I'm answering the question that you asked is actually, in a spiritual conversation, is hugely helpful, because then that person doesn't feel like you're just downloading a bunch of religious jargon on them. They're actually wanting to know the answer, and you actually gave them something to chew on.
Yeah, I wonder how much plays into the uniqueness of having conversations about faith, because I think in so many other elements of life, like, there isn't as much of a fear of getting it wrong, know? And so when it comes to sharing or talking about faith, or you're talking about Easter, there can be this, I think, well, if I don't say it exactly like I was taught it, if I don't say it how I read it in this book, if I don't say it how Brodie said on a podcast episode, then I'm not saying it right. But the problem with that is that if that's all you ever do, the person may have had that conversation already, or the conversation doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is a person that actually has wrestled through with what that looks like for them. And so I don't know if an exercise could be like, oh, how would you put feels like very classroom-esque, but how do you put the Easter story in your own words? Not to change the Bible, right?
Yeah. Right.
But to showcase that, like, oh, you've engaged with the story, and you've engaged with what really happened with Jesus, and you're able to share it in an authentic way. I
think
that's
the way
probably
to be
more
safe,
helpful.
Yeah, I think the way to be safe with that is if the question were, hey, in your own words, could you tell me what the Easter story is and then what it means to you? Because I think that second question gets away from, I got to have all the details right, to, hey, I can give you context for what has meaning in my heart and in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is there a way to share that in an organic way, right? So if somebody's like, so what's still with this Easter thing?
In an organic way? Yes. Tell me what you mean by...
Did you just do that? Did you just...
Tell me what you mean. Well, tell me what you mean by organic, just in my own words. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think... So when you're talking with someone, I think people can tell if it's... I'll call it the salesman approach. The like, okay, this is my pre-scripted, like, I need to invite 10 people to Easter this way. I know if I say it this way, and I say, I agree with someone with he is risen, and they're like, what? And it's like, oh, now I enter into my spiel about, okay, now I know how to say all the things, versus like, like adding more context to the Easter story without necessarily being prompted to, but doing it in a way that feels natural.
Yeah, I usually start out with trying to make it as non-threatening and black and white as I can. So you don't want to come across as, hey, I've got the information, this is right, and now I'm going to download it to you so you get it right. I think what I like to say is, hey, we believe, the church I go to, my family, we believe that this is what happened at Easter, that Jesus came to earth. That's why we celebrate Christmas, that he died on a cross because there was an issue that we have, and that's sin, and that this was the way that he could solve that issue and bring forgiveness to us. And then at Easter, we celebrate that he rose from the dead, which I know is super hard to believe. And if we had a half hour, I could explain it all to you. But that's the basic gist of where it's at. And other people believe different things, but that's what we believe. And that's kind of the framework that I give is hey, this is what we believe. This is what my family believes. Something that says, I'm not in a one-on-one back and forth, like I believe this, now you have to believe this, but it's like hey, here's a group of people who really care about each other, who gather on a regular basis, and this is what they gather around, seems to be less threatening than, well, I believe this, now what do you believe? And kind of lean in. And so, because when you compare community experiences, most likely, unless they just haven't had any religious background, then they'll say, well, that sounds interesting, and you all believe that's probably interesting to them. But if they had a different experience, they would say, well, this is what I picked up when I was a kid or when we were in this place and things like that. And it becomes a back and forth. And usually what comes out in that conversation is, well, I really have a hard time believing this, that he rose from the dead. I have a hard time really believing he rose from the dead. That's perfectly logical and absolutely fair. Okay. And so acknowledging that, but to be able to add a little color to say, well, there's some things that point to the fact that was going to happen. And then don't carry it on. If they ask a question, then I can go a little bit deeper, but just kind of taking baby steps that give a basic gist, but don't make it like hey, let's have a theological debate here.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to bring my timer back out. My 60-second timer. All right.
Okay.
You're having these conversations. And you're like, there's a genuine curiosity about Easter with somebody. How do you invite them to Easter?
I say, hey, our family's going to go to Easter. We go to the 10:30 service. Would you like to come with us, hang out a little bit, and either eat lunch together afterwards, or maybe you and I could have coffee the next week and see what you thought, and we can just have a conversation, and then let it go from there. If they say yes, then I make sure I handle details, because that is the last thing I want to handle. But like, hey, where do I park? When do we meet? What do I wear? I mean, that's a big thing on Easter, because some churches you go and you're dressed up in a suit and tie, and people wear hats and all these things, and then you come to other churches and we're in jeans and a quarter zip, and everybody's real comfortable with that. And so I cover the details and then just tell them how much I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad they said yes. If they say no, which I think is one of the questions you were going to ask me later, but if they say no, then just be able to say, well, no problem, maybe another time, and then move on with a different topic, like it isn't the thing you hinged your day on, because it just needs to be part of an ongoing dialogue instead of the end to the dialogue, as far as that goes. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Do you think there's a different approach around Easter than there would be normally?
For me, no. I just know that it's more socially acceptable to go to church on Easter for a lot of people. And I'm not going to try to sell the series that we're in. We know what we're talking about at Easter. Like if we went to another one, I'd like say, hey, we're talking about home improvement. We're talking about how to make our families better and to parent our kids better. You should come with me. We're going to talk about technology. Okay, then I'm selling the series or the felt need or the value add. At Easter, it's a little bit more like, hey, come with us, be with us, see what you think.
Yeah, so it seems like it's less about the actual mechanics of how you invite somebody and more about like, how do you, the dialogue that happens beforehand and after about like about Easter itself. That might be different about this time of year. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think utilizing Easter as like, the one thing that I would add to what you said is you can, I think, share it in terms of a way of like, hey, yeah, and that's one of the things about Easter is like, if you have questions about Easter and you want to hear like maybe a great explanation of the full story or experience, maybe more of an Easter service, I'd love to give you that opportunity to come with me and experience it that way. And so I think, that may change based upon what somebody's faith background is, right? Because if they have no faith background and they're like, I've heard it might have something to do with Easter. Then, that's an opportunity to share a little bit about like, oh, here's some of the mechanics. But I realize that probably is just kind of words to you right now. But if you'd like to, I'd love to help. I'd love for you to come like experience what, that probably means and feels like, and what being a part of a service that's like a bunch of people that believe this. Hey, what does that look like? And how does that actually change their lives? And this is a great time of year to come check that out and see that. Versus, if somebody has like maybe a history of a certain, like they practice faith previously at a different type of church, maybe highlighting the differences about your church versus that experience. Where if they grew up in a very structured service, sharing, hey, our services are maybe a little bit different. And so that wasn't something that really connected with you. Maybe this is. So that's how I probably approach it.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think really what I sense about the conversation we're having is that you have somebody that's in your mind that you're saying this to, or the type of person. And so do I. And we're going to give a different perspective to a different type of person. And I think that's where it comes into, if you know the person, instead of just walking up to somebody cold, you're going to know how to extend the invitation in a way that's a little bit more tailored to the way that they are and that they're curious about and the way they're looking to move in life.
Yeah. And that just goes full circle back to, knowing somebody and how do you actually care for somebody, and enough of their story and who they are that you can share an invite in a way that's like impactful for them and helpful for them, beyond, and it may be something totally different than any of the things that we talked about. It may be, hey, this is obviously Digital Pastor John signing in, but it may be like, hey, I realize that like even the idea of coming to a church might be like really hard because of like what's happened, but hey, if you want to, check this out online and watch this video and see if you connect with what we're talking about.
No, I think that's really well said, because we've been talking about that the front door isn't the front door right now. It's people. If I go to a restaurant, I get online and I look at it before I go. I want to know what the menu is. I want to know what the prices are. We all do our research online before we step into an environment. It seems almost like the norm now. And so people are doing that with church as well. Yeah.
Man, doing my work for me, Brodie. I love it. Yeah. All right, man. Go. Hey, as we wrap this up, is there any final closing thought you'd have?
I got a lot of final thoughts. I think the last question that that you had asked, and I'm not sure why I answered it this way, but I think when we are going to extend an invitation for Easter, we first need to take the time to realize what Easter is for us. And I know that that's a no-brainer, maybe, but if Easter's just a service and a meal, then you're going to invite somebody. It's like inviting them to a game and a beer afterwards. This is different than that. And this is a different experience for us as people who would be followers of Jesus, if that's where we are in life. And I went through and I thought, what is Easter actually an opportunity for us to do on a personal basis? And I came up with 5 words. The first is to remember what Jesus did, to remember why he did it, to remember that he has done something for us that we can't do for ourselves. Second word is reflect. What do I think about that? How do I feel about that? What do I understand? What's missing in my understanding? What's confusing for me? And how does it connect to me today? The third word is evaluate. And this is the one that I've been spending a lot of time on this year, is just, does what Jesus did for me make a difference in my life? Like, really? Not in what I think, but in what I do. Are my actions showing that this is a game changer? And then the fourth word was participate. We can be an observer of Easter in a very easy way, just like we can be an observer of anything else. But is there something I can do this year? And one of the resources from what you mentioned earlier is that we have a guide for preparing for Easter, some Holy Week experiences of serving others, of communion together. It's just some very, very basic but meaningful things that you can participate in, not just think about. And then the last one is do I really celebrate? Do I really celebrate what this means for me? Do I really believe that without Jesus, the world would be without color and my life would be without hope? And if I believe that, because I have Jesus and I have hope and the world does have color because of him, then does it actually give me joy? Or do I just acknowledge it? And those are some questions that I've been asking myself is, do I remember? Do I reflect? Do I really evaluate? Do I participate or just observe? And then is there joy that comes out of this? And so I think there's some challenges for us to engage a little bit deeper so that when somebody gets curious, there's actually something below the surface to share.
I mean, that just touched really like the heart of why we would invite somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Is that when you're experiencing those things all the way up to that joy, it's like, man, I want somebody else to have this too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's really powerful. Thanks, Brodie. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoy this.
Well, that was my conversation with Brodie. You can find some links in the description of this video to some of the things we talked about. I do want to highlight one thing that we're offering, which is this page on our Easter page. There's a lot of commonly asked questions about Easter. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll be able to find answers to a lot of common questions about Easter. Things like, where did the Easter bunny come from? Why is Easter on a different day each year? Things like that. That might help you, yourself become curious about Easter, but also the person that you're investing in, your one, become curious about Easter as well. So I hope you'll check that out. And I hope you like and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.